was one of them for about 5 years in a very tough period in our history during the 1960s. But the one thing that indicates to me that the troops do not find my position offensive in any way. Because if you look at the donations coming from active military personnel, I get more donations than all the other candidates put together. That should tell us something, that they're not as anxious to go to war as some people think. And I got to thinking, well, that's exactly the way it was in 1965 when they were escalating in Vietnam. And I thought, well, you know, I was in between active duty and going into the reserves, and I was in my medical training. I'll tell you what, I was not very happy when they were escalating at that time. But think of our troops, what they've been through, the guard units and the reservists, and how many trips they've made over there, and the buddies that they use, and the casualties. We've lost 8,500 Americans already, 40,000 severe injuries, hundreds of thousands now applying for veterans benefits. This is going to go on for decades and decades, and it's not going to stop. Matter of fact, it's being expanded. They're talking about going into 2 more countries. There are people now willing to say that maybe the Iranians might be a military power someday in the future, so we got to go to war against them now. I don't think that makes any sense whatsoever. We ought to change our foreign policy. We ought to have a strong national defense. We ought to defend our Constitution, and we ought to mind our own business.
Yeah.
I'll be back. That would be a place I think it would be much easier to cut than dealing with our problems here at home. But it would not be easy. You do need to cut a lot of spending here at home too. But if you had to start with departments, they asked me which agency I want to cut. I said, why don't we talk about the departments that we want to cut? Why couldn't we? Why do you feel a real need to have the Department of Education in Washington D.C.?
No.
Why don't we get rid of the Department of Education? You save many millions and millions of dollars, billions of dollars on the Department of Education. The people in the states and the community should have the ability and the wisdom to run their own schools. We don't get better schools because we spend more money on schools. But I tell you, the best example of this is Washington, D.C. We do have the legal responsibility to monitor D.C. because it's a federal city. And they get $17,000 per student. And they have the worst situation. The education is bad. They have more drugs and violence than probably any other place, and they're always having trouble. And they come to Congress and they say, you know, we're having a tough time, just give us more money. But I'll bet you there's not very many, I bet there's no city in this state, in Iowa, that's getting anything close to $17,000 per student. Then you think about, well, what about people who go to private school and homeschooling? Homeschoolers, I know a few, and they don't spend that kind of money on their kids, and they get a pretty darn good education. So we don't need to be spending that money, but we need to change our attitude about the role of government. That is the biggest thing. I don't think it is just budgetary. We as a people have to ask ourselves, what should the role of government be? And the founders asked that question. The colonists, when they decided the role of the king is what they did not like, so they wanted to have a new system where the role of government was different. I think the #1 purpose of the role of government is to protect liberty. I think that is what we should be doing.